Hi again. I have no snazzy intro line, but I do have three great books for you. So that will have to be enough. Um, First one up is crime. I haven't been reading crime quite so much recently, and I was grateful to sink into a nice escapist read with Red River Road by Anna Downs, which is also my book of the month. And oh yeah, like the pages turned on their own. It's a story that follows van lifers, and we're set a little bit in that influencer, or quite categorically in that influencer world, where to simplify things, because I can't tell you that much, because this is a very cleverly put together novel which rests quite a lot on people's identities and their backstories and what's happened to them and who is talking at the time and what they think about other people. So basically we have the main character, Katy, who is ostensibly following in the footsteps of her disappeared sister, Phoebe's um, sort of van life trip that she was vlogging as she was going around Australia. And somewhere along the way, she picks up or finds herself encumbered, if you like, with another young woman, Beth. Only she doesn't know her as Beth because this girl is hiding hiding her story for safety reasons. You have another cast of characters, around these. Some of them are the people who'd been following Phoebe on on her Insta and sort of commenting on what she was doing. So obviously we're looking in there to see are there any kind of stalkery type people, because Phoebe has disappeared and lots of people have disappeared on this stretch of Western Australia highways. So we're in the van life campsite, very clever writing about scams, very clever writing about sort of control, abusive relationships, maybe. We're talking about that kind of adrenaline of not knowing who the baddies are, who's sending the messages. So these two young women sort of find themselves involuntarily teamed up to get to the end of finding out what had happened to Phoebe. There is a side character called Wyatt, who's a young man living in a house with his father, and his older brother has left home. They had been very close, and that whole narrative is very strongly linked. Absolutely, sort of deliciously creepy in places. You really don't know what's going on in Wyatt's household. You're terrified for both Beth and Katy, and you don't really know who's going to come a cropper. Ripper of a read. It's an absolute, if you want that page turner, and I was fascinated by that whole van camper. Well, I've done a bit of camping because it's one of the only places I can go with Il Doggo, because he's allowed in campsite caravan in the cabin. So we've become a little bit more affectionate towards campsites, and it was great fun to read into that and to see how people on those in these situations interact, look out for each other, how people on the road form a community. Fascinating. It'll keep you on tenterhooks and you'll get deeply involved in the psychology of everybody. Next one up on psychology, which was utterly brilliant, was Kate Kruimink's Heartsease. Now, not a book that I had read Kate's first one and found it absolutely outstanding. And this one, very different. I think it's a little bit based, if I have read her notes correctly, on personal experience, but it is probably one of the most finely drawn yet deliberately played around with ideas of a sisterly bond, of a little bit about what it's like to lose someone, what a mother is or should be, about being sort of haunted by things. But the most surprising thing about this book is how much it destabilizes or unsettles you, so that you're not always sure you've got a grasp on things, at least not from the outset, but as that's the reward of reading. And it's a very sort of ingenious thing that Kruimink has created here. So we are ostensibly dealing with two sisters who are meeting at a silent retreat, and you realise they're in their 30s. They have been very sort of bonded on to each other since they lost their mother, when the older Charlotte, who we refer to as Lot, kind of just turned 18, and her younger sister Nellie, has been he's still schooled, but is in school, but in sort of difficulty with this loss. And that Nellie has always believed her mother never really, you feel that, never really loved her, yet she keeps coming into her subconscious, or she thinks she's seeing her. And Nellie is the chaotic, we have this often this sort of contrast between the organized on the outside, very conventional Lottie, who's taken charge of things because, the world has almost obliged her to do that, and she's become successful, married, children. And then you have Nellie, who just can't settle, has gone to, has had difficulty with her schooling, and lives with a best mate, but their relationship is aromantic and asexual. But they're very, very close. These two sisters are meeting up on a silent retreat, and from then on it just becomes hilarious, mostly. Yet Kruimink sort of pulls the rug out from under our feet constantly, because we learn that the younger sister, Nellie, is actually no longer alive either, and that there has been trauma. So we're dealing with this whole traumatic, what happens? And we've become so attached to Nellie that it's what Kruimink is. We're looking at her personality, how an accident can happen, and what the aftermath of grief really is. So it's kind of a re-engineering again of their relationship. I've found it to be very, very clever and very deeply felt. I was quite moved at times by the kind of, you're going through this with them. I thought it was an excellent read. So that's another goodie. And the last one, which is a bit of a surprise, Ghost Cities by Siang. And I hope I said that right. My goodness, it's a marvel. Completely different read again. So we are really giving you a mixed bag today. But this one is difficult to pin down and yet easy. It's a two-braid novel set in mostly set in China, and it's kind of set in the China, at least, of myth and mythology. So we have a young in one timeline we have a young interpreter who, because of his Chinese heritage, is obviously sort of gone ahead to do English-Chinese translation. And as it turns out, he knows no Chinese, really. So there is a whole narrative to which I'm not really party about how, what your Australian and then Chinese roots and what you keep going and what you culturally, what your investment in the cultures are. But he becomes mocked by his workplace because they know that his Chinese is no better than Google, and then becomes a kind of, through circumstances, becomes a kind of living bad Chinese meme, gets picked up, or interest is taken in him by a baby bow director who's this larger-than-life personality who says, right, got your job for you. Would you like to, he makes films, would you like to come and work on a film? But I'm going to relocate you in this ghost city in, in China, which is a kind of a notion that, I think we're probably also dealing with the idea that there are these huge and empty cities for, people to migrate out of the bigger cities into those, and everything would be all set up a little bit like a film set. And there's the reality of that. And the other timeline is a sort of a fable, fairy tale, myth story of an emperor who wants to keep hold of his power and wants to subjugate people and wants to organize life. And the more he gets his way, the bigger his ego becomes and the bigger his personality becomes and the more violence he perpetrates on people. But it's all kept at this sort of, that's what's astonishing is the register. I think the way Liu was writing about the language he uses to write about the myth, and then the language he's using to write about this very contemporary world where everything is not as it seems. So we're dealing with people who create worlds to satisfy their egos, therefore they're not, are they real? And in the world of the Chinese emperor, who is, fabled and monstrous and magnificent, we also will have the sort of themes of who he is. We'll have a lot of those sort of iconic fairy tale characters, the trickster, the mountain. We will also have the person who will, the brother, and then the person who will bring about his downfall. And in the modern, we have a mirror image of that. It's incredibly complex, beautifully wrought. The writing is absolutely stunning. And I must admit, I was kind of blown away by it. I thought this was one of the most fantastic pieces of writing I've seen for a long time. And it kept me engaged all the time. This is great fun because you go to each timeline and you're going, I want to know more about what's happened with this emperor and how devious, and the writer is as devious to have been able to do this. And then you want to flip straight back to see how the love affair is going, how the film set is going. Is baby Bao, I mean, he's just the emperor. It's the same thing. How is that going to resolve? It's an absolute a feast for the intellect, for the senses, for the language. It's a delight. I really would put it as an Australian marvel. So pick that one up. That's it. Them's me 3. There will be more soon. This was quite quick, at least I think it was. If you enjoyed that, you can like and subscribe, but like no sweat. And I will see you again for the next roundup. Bye. Haven't we made it, my love? Oh, honey, look how we made it.